So, so hello to everyone who's just joining today. Welcome to today's Totara community webinar, where we'll be focusing on a topic that many people in the Totara community have asked for several times. So today we're really lucky because we're going to get a masterclass on how to calculate the cost of learning. So to help us reflect on this and how much your learning programs are really costing your organizations, we're joined by two of this year's Totara award winners, Elton, the Manager of Learning and Development at Charles River Laboratories. Hi, Elton.
Hi.
And Adri, Marketing and People Director at Totara Platinum Partner Actua Solutions. Hi, Adri.
Hi to all. Thank you for joining.
I'm really glad to have you both with us today to talk more about your project and to understand how you've managed to save so much money at Charles Rivers. So in the webinar today, we'll start off with a bit of context behind the Charles Rivers and Actua Solutions project, and then we'll be moving on to looking at exactly how it is that you can calculate the cost of learning at Charles Rivers. So if we just move on to the second slide, Elton, thanks. So just a little bit of housekeeping. As we say, you're very welcome to ask any questions today. If you do that in the Q&A section, it just means we can monitor those questions, but you can also chat in the chat section. As we were just talking about before, this webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available on the Totara community. So if you're worried about missing anything or you want to take pictures, don't worry, this webinar will be available afterwards. And you're also very welcome to ask questions after the webinar as well. In the community, you can @tag Elton, you can @tag Adri, and we'll be able to come back and answer some of the questions and help you if you're really thinking about how to calculate the cost of your learning. So if we just go to the next slide. So as I say, if you're finding this webinar on the internet, for example, if you find it on YouTube, you can come to the Totara community. Their web address there is totara.community. And we also have a help site where you can learn all about Totara products, and that's at totara.help. Just a little bit of background about Totara if you're new to Totara. So Totara creates talent experience software. Just going to the next slide, Elton. Thanks very much. So Totara creates talent experience software that helps to align learning, engagement, and performance management at your organizations. So if you are interested in having a demo of Totara, you can see a link there, totaralearning.com/demo. But that's a little bit about Totara, but now it's time to learn more about Charles Rivers. So Elton, if you could tell us about Charles Rivers, that'd be great.
Sure. So again, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your day. I appreciate it. Again, a little bit about our company. We were founded in 1947, so we are celebrating our 75th anniversary. We are what's called a contract research organization, or CRO. Essentially what this means is that we are a research support organization to pharmaceutical, biomedical, agrochemical, veterinary medicine programs and organizations around the world. It is our goal to assist these organizations to bring therapies to market, whether that's a food additive, a brand new COVID vaccine, COVID treatment, an antibiotic, or a medical device, and to navigate the processes by which you go from the qualification and quantification of the therapy to actually all the way through the discovery, the safety assessment and efficacy testing, all the way to commercialization and marketing and actually manufacturing of that content. Within my business of Charles River Insourcing Solutions, I focus in the basic research and discovery arenas, but we do cover the entire spectrum of research and development services, all the way from literally helping them at the beginning all the way to putting it first in man. We are a multinational company. We are currently just over 22,000 employees as of last week, from what I understand, and we are based out of 110 different facilities in 20 different countries. So as you can see, we're a really big program. Even my division, Insourcing Solutions of Charles River, is literally 76 locations in 11 countries, but that's also 9 different languages that I have to support, 9 different cultures, actually more than that. As you can see in the infographic, kind of give you an idea of the different therapy areas that we support in regards to moving our customers' programs from concept all the way to cure. Our motto is every step of the way. So it is important to understand that as a CRO, we're not creating or marketing or selling these therapies ourselves for profit. We are here to help those organizations move it forward, and learning and training is a big piece of that process. Moving on to a little more about our values and who we are and how learning becomes a piece of that. One of our corporate philosophies is our core values of care, own, lead, and collaborate. And we refer to this as our DNA. Yeah, the pun is intended. It is what makes us who we are and what's made Charles River move from such a very small program in 1947 with Dr. Foster and his wife packing up rats and bringing those to research organizations in the Boston, Massachusetts area, all the way to being the global leader in CRO services. We talk a lot about learning as a part of our processes for energizing, empowering, and engaging and developing what we'd like to believe is the world's best staff, research staff available, not only to ourselves, but also to the customers that we support. And doing that, training has got to be a foundation of everything that we do. Again, ultimately, our goal is to help everyone out there. There isn't anyone in this world. If you've had your COVID vaccine, you have had support from Charles River because we helped develop and approve and test all of the vaccines globally that have been produced and have been approved for use in Europe as well as in the Americas. We achieve a lot of this by adding and training, retraining, developing, providing opportunities for growth and flexible work schedules, as well as advanced training opportunities, and allow that to, at the end of the day, I guess the key here is it's about the people. Without individuals like myself and my team and all of the colleagues that I work with across Charles River, we're not able to make that happen. And there's some amazing stories. I wish I had more time. I'd love to talk a lot about them because they're really, they'll often bring tears to your eyes. Some of the things that we have been able to help individuals do and programs bring to fruition. Again, at the end of the day, connecting and providing digital resources for training and learning is one of the other key foundations that has allowed our program to grow and strengthen itself over the years. And I'm pleased to help share some of those concepts with you all.
And thanks, Elton. Yeah, it's incredible to think about the amazing work that Charles Rivers does on a daily basis. And you joined Charles Rivers in about 2002, if that's right?
2003, actually. So, yep.
And what did the learning solution look like then? And what were some of the challenges you were facing at that time when you joined? I can see the smile there coming, the progress you've made since then.
So ironically, my boss from my early days, I came out of the US Army as a vet tech and research technician and supporting programs there. And my former commander actually hired me into Charles River because he had this brand new business that had been bought by Charles River, and they had no training. And we had built a relationship over the years in the military and had a friendship and a professional relationship. And he said, I need you to do the same thing here. So I said, Carrie, sure. Packed up, moved. I now drove a lot further to work, but it was an interesting situation. And they were very pencil and paper. We were doing things on Excel spreadsheets and very rudimentary training organization. So one was evaluating it and developing a more formal program. And part of that was, since we became a very large and decentralized program, supporting what we did really required us to ramp up our efforts, and digital learning and digital learning management was a necessity, not an option. And that was determined very, very quickly within months of my arrival to Charles River. But it took us a few years to get there. It wasn't an easy path initially. One thing to keep in mind is, because we do work within the life sciences industry, we are a very heavily regulated entity. There are more rules on the books for what we do. The only organization or business entity in the United States that's more heavily regulated is air traffic control. And that's a fact. There are more Code of Federal Regulation laws on books about what we do than just about every other business out there. As a result of that, a lot of it was we were processing or needed to support training efforts from every stage of the employee life cycle. And one of the other unique things that we find at Charles River is I deal with everyone from GEDs or don't even have high school or secondary diplomas for graduating from school, all the way through professional staff. So I've got, like I said, GEDs to PhDs, and I have to train all of them. And in some cases, that training is unique to the role that you occupy. In others, it's global or standardized training that we have to provide in 9 different languages. So the challenges continue to grow and grow as the organization came up. And once again, digital learning was the only approach that would really work. We also heavily rely on both what are often referred to as soft as well as hard skills, or I'll refer to them as technical and non-technical skills. We have heavily integrated both activities for learning and development into our instance of Totara and made them work successfully, so that literally an employee can come here and every aspect of what they do, including the documentations that prove their education and their experience, are all retained and recoverable and reportable from within our instance. As I mentioned earlier, we are geographically dispersed and we're located throughout the world, literally. I have 9 active languages that I must support as part of our company policies, but we have another 11 languages potentially for staff that may come from other nations and work in that nation at that point in time, and they need familiarity or comfort and accessibility to read that in their home or their preferred language. Oops.
Great, thanks, Elton. So quite a broad range of learning challenges there. And so to help you with that, you decided to partner with Actua Solutions. So just to Adri, if you wouldn't mind introducing us to Actua.
Yeah, we're delighted that Charles River selected us as their e-learning partner to provide a solution to all these challenges. But really, it has been a solution that has been co-created between Actua and Charles River. And really, Charles River has been the leader of this project. They have been super committed. And that is really our role, to empower clients to be an enabler with open source. So we're a Barcelona-based company with the most talented and international team. And our mission is to help companies to create organizations where employees have the opportunity to grow and thrive through learning and development. So that is our introduction. That is Actua Solutions. And that being said, we are also very proud because we have been awarded with the best healthcare project with this project. So it is fantastic, and I will leave it to Elton for him to share all the insights that he has gathered throughout these 8 years of, or more than 8 years of project with Totara. So thank you, Elton.
Well, massive congratulations to you both as well for winning that award. It's too hard to win these awards, so congratulations on that. And so since 2013, you've partnered with Actua Solutions to ensure your Totara platform runs smoothly and does everything that Charles River's needed to. So what are some of the things that you've achieved together over the last years?
So if we looked at the solution as a whole, we again started back in 2013. At that point in time, it was only several hundred employees and some customers based in Spain and partially in France and Italy that we were supporting for accreditation training that they're required to achieve and be signed off on before they begin their research work and activities. We've grown extensively since that time. We started off, I believe it was version 6 when I joined into the effort. And we're currently running Totara Learn version 14 with the intent to upgrade later this year to 15, 16, or from what I heard yesterday, possibly 17. We'll see which one's going to be available this fall. We completed some other major activities in the last few years in 2017, simply because at that point we had moved beyond just the business level support activities with our instance of Totara. We moved to integrating HR import to bring all of our employee data over into the system automatically. That was a huge benefit to us simply because I was no longer having to manually manage learners anymore and was able to refocus on some other activities, and over the last few years add some additional improvements. As I had mentioned earlier, we are in the life sciences industry, so we do have to follow what's called, I'll refer to as the GXP, but these could be good laboratory, good scientific, good manufacturing practices, compliance regulations, both in the European Union as well as here in the Americas. I'll refer to as Annex 11 and Part 11 compliance, which refers specifically to electronic signatures and ensuring that the training records that are being generated are actually reflecting what's really going on in the real world, and that's auditable and recoverable and reportable and verifiable should the FDA or the OECD or another regulatory body around the world come in and want to see those records. We can produce them quickly and responsibly and exactly with what's going on. We also wanted to enable dashboards, one of the newer features in some of the most recent versions of Totara, to really improve some of that capability and give both the end user, the learner, and their management teams actionable information. It's tough to drill into some of these big reports, as many of you will probably know, and find all the data that you need. And the idea being is at the end of the day, in compliance with the GXPs, if you are the employee and this is your training, you own that data. It is your responsibility in partnership with your manager. So giving them access to that information and adding those dashboards made it really, really easy for them to own it and act upon it. We have, over the last 9 years, 8-9 years, we've migrated approximately 8,000 courses into the system. Some as simple as standard operating procedures and policy documents. Others are 196-part program courses that we've put together that are part of our accreditation training, and everything and anything in between. So we've used almost all of the activity tools that are available, as well as our own courseware and authorware development resources to build a truly blended learning program. For my team, everything that our employee does on the learning and development front is recorded and maintained in here, with the exception of about 6 or 7 pieces of printed paper that we have to produce either for a regulatory requirement or for a contractual obligation under that contract statement of work. Recently, we enabled SAML 2.0 or single sign-on options so that Charles River employees globally, and this is 2 different domains. I have team members all around the globe, as well as I also have team members in China. So the standards for SSO requirements differed, and we were able to work with Totara and with Actua in particular to get those set up so that our employees, no matter where they are in the world, one click of the button, you're in, it verifies who you are, or if you're remote, you authenticate with your multi-factor authentication and you're into campus. There's no more having to remember a separate password, which is a wonderful benefit to them. We've also recently added in our virtual meeting tools for Teams as well as Zoom. We use both of those depending on the size or the type of the audience for our training. And that's gone exceptionally well and made our virtual training programs, especially in the last few years with the pandemic response and so many people working remotely, having to participate in what traditionally was classroom face-to-face learning is now being done more and more virtually, and having that seamlessly set up, and then more importantly, allowing the trainers to manage that on themselves with no concerns has been a huge benefit to us.
Great. 8,000 courses sounds like a healthy number.
Yes.
Good. And what are you currently working on together with Actua?
So one of the other things we're talking right now is actually linking some open content marketplaces. We have 3 already actively enabled within system, and one of our goals later this year is to enable LinkedIn Learning, which is something we heavily use for both personal and professional development opportunities. But getting, once again, going out to where the experts in the content are and bringing that data back to our central LMS is really the key piece there. Other initiatives that we're working on right now include the digitalization of our all of our training documents, as we had talked about, Matt, earlier. We just recently announced the acquisition and merger of another company that's a sister organization to what we do. And those hundreds of employees currently are doing all of their training activities on pencil and paper or maintaining them on an Excel spreadsheet. So bringing them into the world of digital learning and being able to do that and report on that in a more effective manner is going to be a huge undertaking. Over the last 3-4 years, we've actually migrated approximately 400,000 records of learning from a variety of different sources into the system, some of them pencil and paper, some of them from access databases. I even joke, I think there was one FileMaker Pro database site. We have one group that's running OneNotes, so bringing all those records into system so that regardless of wherever they came from, everything is now stored in here and aligned to a single reporting structure, a single system has been a huge undertaking. We've developed a very effective online professional accreditation program, both in the European Union and UK, as well as here in the United States and North America. That program is now turned not only from employee focusing, but also to the public and customer facing, where we can assist those same individuals doing the same types of work to be accredited under those national or block requirements and getting that done. And we've heavily integrated in virtual training to make that a reality, especially in today's world. The automation of assignment of learning has been huge. So using the audiences tools and other things along those lines to provide the learning that someone does need for their job, whether this is their first day on the job or they are a 10-year veteran with all sorts of experiences. We still know that all of that learning's here and we can measure it and make sure that everyone is on the same page. Has been a huge benefit. Refinements, one of the things we've done over the years that my group has been exceptional at is our technical, our hard skills training program that I will refer to affectionately as TASK, is integrating that into the LMS and bringing that qualification and quantification methods for whether you're doing sweeping the floor or you're doing open heart surgery on a pig. All of those skills are incorporated in here, and we know that every individual signed off on that skill has met this standard. And then more importantly, if they need to refresh on those training skills, that training is being reported and tracked and scheduled to be completed in the future. Last but not least here, one of our other bigger final initiatives is linking our learning and development to goals. Now, we do utilize a separate HR management, information management system to handle those goals, but being able to tie those things into learning and saying, okay, in your job description, these objectives are things you need to complete, and here's the learn that you need to do, and when you need to do it has been part of the evolution of our organization. And our corporate senior vice president, our chief people officer, has endorsed that as a strategic initiative and an imperative to ensure that we're retaining and we're maintaining very highly qualified and very capable staff to meet the needs now and in the future for our customers.
Great, thanks, Elton. And before we move on to the sort of heart of today's webinar, calculating the cost of learning, can we have a quick sneak peek at your platform, what it looks like?
Sure. We'll jump to the next slide. Here's some pages. So on the left-hand side, we have an example of the landing page once you're logged in, which is what we refer to as the learner's dashboard. So a quick snapshot, you will see it's very media rich. We really took advantage of like the slick slider tool to make a news announcements and other posts up there that they can see on a recurring basis. Course and program and certification program outlines are using that advanced tiles format from the catalog. So you get a visual representation, including textual information. We've invested heavily in charting out activity completion and progress and what you need to still do or what you should have done might be a little overdue, because yes, it happens. On the right-hand side, we have some examples of some of our course and program templates. So utilize more media and imagery in them to make them more engaging. The tracking allows the learner to see exactly where they are in process. And last but not least, as I may not have emphasized early on, is we support roughly, well, right now about 22,000 employees globally, but I also support several thousand customers who actually partner with Charles River as part of their organization's learning needs. And we help manage them, and we do a lot of that in campus. So not only do we have SSO login, but we still maintain the old manual processes for those individuals that do not have SSO capabilities.
Great, thanks so much, Elton, for showing us that. So now if we sort of talk a bit about the calculating the cost of learning. So this is something that many organizations will reflect on, but possibly only after they've built learning, and they may not even do it in that much detail. But as we've talked about before the webinar, you've done this in a lot of detail. So we're really keen and to be educated today as to exactly how you calculate the cost of learning at Charles Rivers.
I do want to emphasize before I get too deep into this that recognize that this is one of the calculations that we utilize and one of the metrics that we approach. And I'll show you some information on it from our scorecards. But I do, one of the things that I often seen, and even in my own development as manager of training activities here at Charles River, is what is the cost of learning? What is the cost of our training? How do I demonstrate to my manager, my director, my vice president, the CEO, and the board of directors of the company as to the value of what we do? And the only way I can do that is to figure out, well, how much does it cost? Likewise, make decisions about, do we invest in developing this internally, or do we go out and find a partner like Actua or another OCM partner that we want to bring that content into the system with? So we'll talk about that. So very first thing I'm going to do is, unfortunately, I'm going to go back to some budgeting 101. So yes, I'm sorry, we got to talk some finances here. But we want to talk about the concepts of direct and indirect costs as the first two elements of the calculation. So a direct cost would be something that is directly attributable to whatever you're doing. So for example, for us, the e-learning software, we use Articulate and Camtasia and Adobe Captivate and other tools. Those license costs would be calculated as part of the direct fees or funds that have to be used to create that content. The course creator's time and labor and effort would be a direct cost. Other things that are directly attributable to that. Then we have to look at the indirect costs. So then I look at my entire training program and I see other things such as my office space or my internet service provider or the electric bill or the water bill, because we got to make coffee and there are restrooms and all these other things that have to be part of managing people. That has a cost, and we want to incorporate a piece of that. And what we've done is we've worked through that. For the most part, for us to build an e-learning or a typical course, we take about 1.75% or just under 2% of our budget is attributed to a course build on average. Now that's a sliding number and we use different values depending on the type of course that we're building with, but I'm going to use that 1.75% value here in my calculation today. So those are the first two elements. The next one then is the census. How big is the audience for this course? Now, I might have an e-learning course that's only going to be applied to our executive management team of 80 or 90 people, or I might have a compliance or animal welfare training course that I'm going to distribute to 20,000 employees. Knowing what that number is allows us to get an idea of how many people will benefit from that training. We'll use that value in our calculation. Next is the course lifespan. So how long is this content going to be relevant to what we're doing? If it's a health and safety topic like bloodborne pathogens, well, I've probably been using the same BBP course since 2007, something like that, maybe with some minor tweaks, but there are other topics that may come up, for example, COVID training, other things along those lines, policy training that might come out that are only good for a year, but knowing what that lifespan is also going to be part of our calculation. And then last but not least is the recurring completion opportunity. So again, if I take that same bloodborne pathogens course and I say, okay, you need to repeat this by law every year, and this course has a lifespan of 3 years, I'm going to get 3 recurrences out of that course, and I have the value that generates, or the cost that would generate if I had to go out and outsource that content. So if we take all of those pieces, the direct and indirect costs, the census or the audience size, the course's lifespan, and the number of recurrences that I can use it in, I'm going to get the following formula. So cost, in this case, we do the direct cost at 100% or 1.0 the value. We then add that to the indirect costs, and then we calculate that by the percentage that we're going to apply. As I said earlier, we typically, for this example, are going to use 1.75%. We would divide that into the total audience size or the census, and then multiply that by the sum of the lifespan times the recurrence. So I'm sorry, I know no one was probably expecting either this late in the day or this early in the morning to have to do math, but
This is great.
you do. So the plus for me is I have an Excel spreadsheet to handle most of this for me.
Great. Thanks, Elton. And if the audience that's watching today or on the recording afterwards was trying to do this for their own organization, yeah, if you could provide an example of one course, what would that look like?
Sure. So let's go into it. I'm actually going to give you two. I'm going to give you an example of an e-learning course, and then I'm going to take a multi-day workshop or seminar that we'll talk about. The first one here obviously is a health and safety topic. So I won't say this is bloodborne pathogens, but it might be. And we would say in this case, we've got our direct costs, our indirect costs, our census and all that. We know that we spend approximately $8,400. I am going to be using US dollars, but you can use this in any currency you choose as our direct cost for build. So that includes my time, the licensing, the reviewer's time, the editor's time, the media team that helped build my imagery, and the creative services group who did a real quick video snippet that they developed in our training. And then I'm going to take my program's budget, and we're going to pretend that that's right now $316,000 per year. And we're going to calculate that by that indirect percentage value that we're going to apply, which, as I said before, was 1.75%. We knew that our audience for this was going to be approximately 4,200 learners, and that we had the lifespan. This course was good for 1 year, but we could reuse it for 3 recurrent trainings for individuals. So we get that calculation, and you can kind of see the breakdown and ultimately end up with a per person cost of $9.95. Now remember, this is the cost of what that training is. If we had to go out and find that, if we estimated that and had to go price it out there, the reality is the value of this learning is going to be something very different. It could be worth much, much more, because obviously we don't want people to get sick. We want them to be compliant. We want them to do their jobs and handle their work safely. So there are other metrics that come into there. But if we had to outsource this, we estimated that's what it should cost per person per year in this case. Let's look at it from a workshop approach. So you can kind of take the same formula and we can apply it to a multi-day leadership development workshop. We look at our direct cost, in this case, $41,800, and we use that same operating budget for our program and that same prorated or portion or percentage of that indirect cost. And we end up working that all the way down to being $876.48 per person to run this training. Now, why was this so much more expensive? The difference here is if you look at the census in this case was only 54 people. So the per person cost that it would take to do that training or bring it in is going to be much higher. So the lesson there is, if you have the option to field this to a very large audience, that you can do an economy of scale, whereas the reality is if it's a much smaller group, it's going to cost you more per person.
Brilliant. So e-learning all the way.
No, I would never. I often get asked, well, e-learning is a solution. Well, we should do an e-learning. I was like, well, let's assess it first. There are instances where, and I want to emphasize, at my business in Charles River, we are a blended learning organization. We recognize that sometimes being in person, whether you have to do it virtually because of COVID, or you can get in a classroom, or you can get in a lab, or you can do e-learning, is a big piece. For a good example, that is when we're teaching our veterinary surgeons and they're coming in to learn techniques, they start off with a lot of e-learning to ensure that their skills and their knowledge are good. Then we go forward to video-based lessons to show them the actual techniques they're going to run in. Then they come into the lab and they work on mannequins and simulations before they ever start touching a live animal. And then the next piece is they would move on to actually doing directly supervised procedures. Just like if this were a human surgeon, you're going to learn much the same way. So we're, e-learning, absolutely. If I can make it work, I'm going to do that, because that is the solution. But realize that at the end of the day, sometimes you have to do stuff in person.
Yeah, absolutely true. And you talked there about the value of learning as well, which I think is very important. That you're going to move on to in a second, Elton. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that, how you calculate the value of learning as well as the cost.
Sure. So let's go into those a little bit. Again, I'm going to show you the elements of our scorecard. My company policy and leadership will not permit me to share the exact data in there because it is company confidential, but I want to talk about the elements that make up that. So first off, it's not cost right away. So one of the things we look at is scores and values from our Kirkpatrick's assessments. So both level 1, 2, 3, and 4 results. So we're looking at the reaction learning, the behaviors, did we change those? And ultimately, were the results of that learning program achieved or not achieved in some cases? We look at level 5, again, talking about ROI and BCE or BCR or BCR scores. So return on investment. If we spend this much money, how much value are we going to get or not get for that investment? And that's what we'll talk about a little bit here. Going to come back to course cost. Yes, it's going to be in there. So obviously, the very first thing that anyone in management or certainly senior or executive management is going to ask us is, so how much does the training cost in that case? So how do we get those calculations? We look at ROI after the fact, just so that you know. So if you're not familiar with the concept of return on investment, it is a direct measurement of the efficacy or benefit either that you achieve or you gain or you lose from an expenditure of funds for a project. So again, if I spend $100 and I generate an ROI of $1,000, my ROA value is 1 to 10. It's usually a ratio or a percentage, something along those lines. Again, it's going to be also could potentially be expressed as a benefit to cost ratio. Now, what is a BCR? This is usually more of a financial analysis. So ROIs, yeah, you're talking about numbers possibly, maybe financial data, but BCR really is going to be a financial one. And this is usually initially estimated before we start a project to see, is there enough value in us either undertaking that internally or outsourcing that to someone to help us because they're better at it, they can do it faster, they can do it cheaper, they can do it more effectively than we can, and we can generate that benefit from there. Again, BCR scores are very important for us to estimating how we're going to proceed in things. And I will talk a little bit about how that's changed over the years by using Totara and by using e-learning and blended learning opportunities that we've developed with Actua and Totara. When we're talking about BCR scores, they're usually expressed as a ratio, not a ration, but a ratio of either greater than or lesser than 1. So in a score that is greater than or than 1, the project was a benefit. In this case, we generated some sort of benefit, some sort of efficiency, some sort of improvement over what we spent on it. So it's probably a good decision to proceed. Scores lesser than 1 would mean that we had a project that was not of benefit, but not a loss to the organization. If we end up with a project that is lesser than 0, if it's a negative BCR score, this was probably something that should have never made it to the approval board and never have been drafted. So we use that number again. Greater than 1, definitely want to do it. Below 0, don't want to do it. Somewhere between 0 and 1, maybe there's some value. And in fact, actually, I'm going to show you that often early in your programs, these BCR scores are actually going to start out maybe negative, but probably somewhere when in the not where you want to be range. You have to work to get it up above 1. And that's exactly what happened for us. Another metric is training hours. So we also look at the number of hours our trainers are actually in doing their jobs. So obviously there are going to be administrative duties and there are going to be other tasks that they have to do outside of the classroom or outside of the lecture. But we want to try to minimize those depending on the job role, and then more importantly, measure that amount of time, because that means they are training people. They're doing the job we've hired them for. And depending on job role, there are certain thresholds or levels of training hours we expect our trainers to achieve. In addition, we look at compliance levels. So again, a measurement of completion usually expressed as a percentage on our scorecards. But again, what did we achieve? And it's important to realize that even though we're striving for perfection, the reality is often you won't get there. There will be people out, people on vacation, people working at different hours or different shifts that may need a blended learning approach. Maybe they do need the e-learning because Well, they're not going to come in or at 2 p.m. because they start work at midnight to do their training. We may want to give it to them while they're on shift electronically, or vice versa. Another example, Matt, you're recording today's webinar. We'd love it to see thousands of people joining this, but the time may just not have been right. But you know what? There's an amazing thing called on-demand video. We love it all the time, right?
Yeah, that's true. And actually, just as reminders, people, we are recording this. So yeah, and if you do have questions afterwards, feel free to ask those afterwards. I know there's a lot to take on today, but yeah, that's a great point, Elton, as well.
So in addition to that, we also look at competency, proficiency, and certification standards. So our ability of our staff to do their jobs. What does it take? And I'm not going to talk about the difference in these terms, but recognize that they're building upon each other, and that's important to recognize where someone is. One of the things that we're now able or starting to do is when management says, listen, in the next 6 months, we're going to see this type of work increase by 300%. How many people can do that job? And we know that X number are certified and X number are in some level of proficiency or competency for that skill, working towards certification. Maybe we need to add even more people in, or maybe we need to shift focus on some staff to make sure we're ready for that business when it arrives.
Thanks, Elton. And yeah, we've talked there about compliance, and obviously that's something that a lot of organizations will be focusing on quite heavily when it comes to calculating the value of learning for their organization. Is that something you could share more with us on?
So let me go into some real actual metrics, and these were actually part of the values that we presented as part of this year's Totara Awards nomination package. So I'm going to be looking at some, in this case, 5 different classes of e-learning for the most part that we are doing, and our compliance levels. So one of the things we started looking at was early on was how many people are doing it and how many people needed to get it done. So this is one of the very first metrics that we looked at. And while it's not a dollar sign, it's still cost and value to our learning programs. And as you can see, as we went on, as we integrated more and more into the LMS, we were able to show a higher level of compliance. Why? It was easier to access. It was more consistent access. They knew where to go to get it. And more importantly, that documentation was electronically completed. There wasn't any need to transcribe something from an attendance roster into a spreadsheet that gets combined with 15 spreadsheets that gets sent up and dumped into another database that then spits that data out, where there are so many opportunities for human error. It's all being done at once. Now you will notice as time goes on, you'll see some NAs in here. And the reality was, as we start off with a lot of our compliance, our mandatory topics, health and safety, regulatory topics, animal welfare, orientation, onboarding, IT security was another one that came on last few years. So as we go along, we're seeing more and more requests to define or get a little deeper into the weeds in regards to what types of training and what types of compliance levels are we or are we not achieving. The other nice thing here is we can also start to set metrics. We can say, we expect as a business to be able to do this level or higher. And if we've met expectations. Here you're getting into that goal setting that we talk about with management. You know, we can now say to managers, I expect for your team to have 100% compliance by October 1st. And I can go into the LMS and I can measure that as the indirect manager, as the director, as the vice president, or get that data from the LMS team if needed. And it's not arguing about whether or not we did it or not. The data is there. In my business, you cannot argue with data. It's real, it's valid, it's there. How do you get around it? So it's not hard. It makes it easy to not be the mean person and accuse someone of not meeting expectations or rewarding someone for achieving them. It's seeing that value and then manage to that value. In addition, obviously, the next thing we looked at was course completion. So looking at that value, and you can see here going back to 2014, I still remember in 2015, 2016, talking with one of the early administrators about the fact that we had broken the 10,000 course completion threshold in a year, and we were thrilled. I mean, we spent probably half an hour at that time on Skype for Business, just lauding each other and how we did a great job and all this stuff. And then you look over the next few years and you can see how we continue to escalate that dramatically as we start to integrate the rest of the Charles River business into our instance of Totara and grow from there. Just like everyone else, you can see also in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, training kind of became a secondary issue and it started to drop off. and that was recognized last year. And we've continued to try to improve upon that and continue to grow as we move into 2021, 2022, because we do recognize learning and development is a key piece of employee engagement, employee recognition, employee empowerment, and those are so important to our organization. They're important to every organization, really. Another value, again, we talk about ultimately what is the cost of learning. So we talked about how to calculate that per course cost. Now I'm going to apply that to what did we actually generate in savings or in costs if we had to outsource this or go out and do it ourselves. And you can see that in this case, now what this chart does not have is our ROI and BCR scores. And you would actually see our first couple of years, we actually were kind of at a loss. We actually had BCR scores above 0, but below 1. And as we moved on, that number moved over 1 and has continued to grow excessively over the last few years to be very, very high levels. And I'll talk about how that has helped drive my conversation and business decisions in just a moment.
Thanks, Elton. Thanks to everyone who's still with us today. We're just extending for the 5 or 10 minutes or so. And we're getting a few questions coming in now as well. And we'll be sure to answer those just in a minute or two.
Okay. So the results. So how did we help out? Obviously, we centralized our training program, which was very decentralized. And we had 43 different record-keeping systems, including pencil and paper that were out there. The increase to or improvement to accessibility and visibility, I can't stress this enough, especially in a global organization. Learning participation metrics have gone way, way up, as well as compliance levels for mandatory training have increased significantly, or our ability to report on those at a very precise level has increased as well. Our standardization for course design and delivery, this is going to be one, probably maybe not a cost issue, but one of the things to talk about is what I found early on was we were kind of the wild, wild west. We had people doing everything from death by PowerPoint to these really fancy, it took them 2 years to build the simulation for something that only took 10 minutes to teach someone in person. So being able to standardize how and what we were going to use to build courses was an unexpected benefit that we had. And obviously blending our learning program, but doing so within the electronic medium was the overarching success that we've had, and we're getting better at it every day. In addition to that, how did we save money? Again, often get asked what were the numbers at the end of the day. We talked about those BCR scores being negative values or below 1. By now, we are now seeing a 300% increase in investment in our organization's training program, and that involves both manpower as well as resources. If you go back, we were spending just a few $1,000s with Actua in 2013, 2014. We've now, we've increased that a lot, and we've benefited both organizations as a result. Again, our BCR scores are above, reached a 1.0, greater than 1.0 value in 2016. So that was a huge benefit. And obviously, the other piece was not only did we see an investment in learning, but we also saw the cost for developing learning almost reduced by 2/3 beginning since 2017. So our ability to provide that learning in a cost-effective strategy and way has benefited the organization, even as the company's been giving us more money to do more things. Obviously, very high levels of compliance. We've seen that number increase, and actually we're now being tracked and having to report on that in some cases on a daily basis, as crazy as that might sound. But one of the other unexpected but really beneficial items was the improvement in retention and upward career mobility for our employees. Ironically, my vice president actually referred to that as the war for talent, because just like every other organization out there, we're struggling to bring in and keep highly qualified, highly trained, and highly proficient staff to do this really, really difficult and exceptional work that we do internally for our customers. And we have to have that because of the nature of the work that we do. So training is a big, big piece of that puzzle.
Great, thanks, Elton. If you're going to pass on any sort of main words of wisdom to the audience today, what are some of the main lessons you've learned?
Sure. So measure what you're going to manage. And if you're not going to manage it, don't measure it. Or if you're not going to measure it, don't expect to manage it. You have to have data to drive your decision making. And I can promise you, as you move up in your organization's hierarchy, talking with those higher level leaders, they want the numbers. They want to see budgets. They want to see numbers. They want to see values. They want to see those measurements to help them drive the decisions, because we're a finite resource company. We have only a finite budget. There are going to be decisions that are going to have to be made to, yes, we will support this. No, we cannot support this. Yes, we will plan for this in the future, or no, we're never going to support that because it's just not cost effective. Start small, work on the small things that you can do. Something as simple as building in smile sheets or Kirkpatrick level 1 assessments to your training. If you're not already doing that, I really encourage you, because you may find that you think this is the world's greatest training, but your learners, they think it sucks. The reality is maybe the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but until you have data to drive that conversation, you don't know, and you can't make a decision against that. So feedback, I can't stress getting that enough at all levels of your training program. It takes extra effort and it takes extra time and resources, but it's so worth what you need to do. Obviously, develop your metrics and your measurements and your activities to complement one another. So whereas the direct manager is going to be looking for, are all of my trainings done for myself and my team? And that corporate vice president is going to say, well, how much money did we budget for? And what was the ROI scores? Everything in between that is going to probably need to complement those levels. So build your levels of reporting, your levels of metrics, and your levels of measurements to complement each other and build upon each other. Hopefully this presentation has talked a little bit about how that can be done. Right. And this last lesson, this was one that I probably should have done much earlier, is anytime you're implementing a large scale training program, whether it's an LMS or other tools, build a governance committee, build a team that will help oversee and help guide what you do. Or, large publicly traded organizations like Charles River, we have a board of directors of people outside the company that come in and tell us what we are doing is good, or maybe you need to change and shift your focus here, or focus on this business activity. It's no different at this level. Having a team of people that can help guide you is so, so important. Just as something saying is, how or what are we going to name a course? What's a course ID? You ask 7 people that question, you're probably going to get 7 different answers. The problem is that that's not a really good way to manage courses in an LMS. Last but not least, plan your upgrades and plan your integrations well in advance. Think about what you're doing. It comes back to just leading your projects and ensuring that you're looking at all of the opportunities, all the challenges that you might be facing, and see how those new technologies, new techniques, and new methods can help you, and plan for that in the future. It really does make a difference. I know from my team working with Actua, we tend to talk 6 months in advance at a minimum about what we want to do. In fact, actually, Audrey and I and the team, Eva, we had a great call last week, or just yesterday, sorry, about where we're going to be this fall.
A great piece of advice there. Plan your upgrades. Yeah, well in advance. Great to know that. Thanks to everyone who's come to the webinar today. We're going to start asking a few questions now, so if that's okay, because we're getting a few that are coming in. And some of these are similar, so I'll sort of ask them at the same time. So we say, so this has sort of been the crux of the webinar really, how do you calculate the return on investment in your company? And Francesca is also asking, I'd like to know if it's possible to talk on some example of ROI or BCR calculation.
Sure. So again, the ROI or return on investment is going to be a calculation of what we've invested into that project or program and what the end results were. So if you took the examples I talked about with the cost of a course build, and we looked at all the courses that we fielded in that year, and that calculation is used to see that cost chart that I showed you, that would give you an example of, okay, that's how much it would have cost us to go and outsource that, or how much benefit we got from that, and break that against what our budget was, overall department budget was for the year. That gives some idea what that ROI value is. So we would simply just calculate that back into it. I didn't talk a lot about ROI scores. There's a lot to cover today, but maybe that's a topic for a future. We can dive into that a little bit further. But the short answer is you take the costs or the budget that you put into the project, and you take the total returns and divide those into it, and you should be able to get that ROI value. Likewise, a BCR score, we're kind of doing the same thing, but early on, we're estimating, okay, this is how much we need. This is how much we think based upon past experiences with similar things we're going to generate for savings. And then at the end, we come back and we verify it with the ROI scores and say, yep, the BCR was right in place or the BCR wasn't there.
Great, thanks so much, Elton. Just from early on in the webinar, we had a quick question just on the screen that you were showing about the sort of behind the scenes of your platform. And someone was asking, is the homepage showing courses available to the learners, or is it showing the courses someone who's already enrolled on? And that's on one of the screenshots we had at the start.
Good question. So our homepage, and you can actually visit it, it's charlesrivercampus.com, all one word, charlesrivercampus.com. The landing page is a public page, and then you log in. Once you log in, the default is taking you to the learner's dashboard, but they can access their My Learning menu from that main menu. We just use the dashboard as the landing page.
Thanks, Elton. Thank you for your answer there. So they're very happy with the answer. And also we had a note from saying hello to everyone there. Big honor to listen to you, Elton. I want to say thank you for this huge masterclass today. So there you go, positive feedback for you there, Elton. Yeah, I think we've had all of our questions mostly come in now. If you do have any more, like I say, you're very welcome to post those in the community afterwards as well. It's quite a bit. We have another question actually. How do you get access to the data from the organization, from across the organization to prove the ROI? That's an interesting question. That's something that I was thinking as well. You know, for example, the cost of heating, etc., and things like that. Trying to work out those costs. How do you find out that information, Elton?
Yep. So even though I'm the senior manager of learning, I still have to run a training program, which consists of my training department. I have actually I have 2 training centers that we help manage and training facilities around the world that we have to actually build in. And that's actually, so every year I have to build up my operations budget. So that's where I pull those numbers from.
Brilliant. So what would you recommend someone should do? Should they just email, ask their accounts, or what would be the best way to do that, do you think?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if you're not familiar with that, engage with your direct supervisor or your manager they may have that data and probably have that data already. Remember that Charles River, we're a much bigger organization. We have a very heavily integrated financial control system. We have a very clear documentation process and procedures for our budgets each year. We have to measure that as we go by month. And I've been doing that for a long time. You know, some groups that are much smaller or more agile than ours, maybe it's just a matter of, again, looking at what income you're generating or what projects you're creating with versus what expenses you have to come into the company, whether it's the phone bill or the power bill or whatever the case may be. But that's pretty much how I pull all those things together.
Brilliant, thanks, Elton. Just one more question. Do you develop any of the course content, or do you outsource the development of your course content?
Both. We do both. So I would say right now we're probably 65-70% plus is in-house, and then the other 30% is outsourced. That number, outsourced OCM content, is probably increasing in the next few years, especially as we integrate, for example, this fall with LinkedIn Learning. We'll be bringing in that entire course catalog, but we have a couple of other OCM providers that we work with as well too. But at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is so unique to our industry that it's really tough to go out and find someone who could build it for us as well as we could do ourselves.
I just wanted to add one thing, and that they're super proficient and fantastic doing courses with Articulate. And that is another one of the tools that we partner with, which is super powerful and interactive. And I know that you have a lot of licenses and do a lot of courses with it, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot with Articulate, going all the way back to 2006 with the original studio. And we're sold in on Articulate yet.
I just wanted to take just a second to thank the audience that has been together with us for this hour, more or less, to join us, and Elton for sharing all his insights throughout these 8 years or more of the project. Thank you so much, Elton, for your time, because I know time is gold.
Yeah, so we'll just sort of come to a conclusion there. And thanks everyone, as Andrew's saying, and thanks Elton for presenting today. We do have a couple of events coming up in the next week. We have a webinar which you're welcome to come to. I think there's a slide next one, Elton, that has a picture of that. Yep, so upcoming events, we just have a talent experience platform demo. So if you'd like to see the platform in general, you can see that next week on Wednesday. We also have another webinar coming up, which is about creating a healthy coaching culture. That's hard to say. So you're welcome to come to that as well. And yeah, thanks very much to everyone today for your time. And yeah, thanks so much, Elton, and thanks, Adri, for sharing this today.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll come to a conclusion now.
Thank you so much, Elton. Again, thank you, Matt, for organizing. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.